We good? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all lively after lunch, right? I'm Evan Klein, founder of Satrix Solutions. We're going to talk about case studies of companies that elevated their voice of customer programs. So the session title you see here says 3 or more companies. The reason it says that is because originally I was supposed to share 3 case studies, but in fact when I was putting my slides together, I quickly found 5 really good case studies, and I had to share them all. So you're getting 5 for the price of 3 today, so that's pretty good. It's like 67% more value than you thought you were going to get here. And you know, because we're customer service people, it's under promise, over deliver. So that's what I figured I'd share with you here today. So let's jump in. A few things about me. First, I am the loving father of 1 son. I am the loving husband of 1 wife. My wife and I love to hike and travel, and some pretty cool pictures here, I think, in the top right of us in Scotland, the Scottish Highlands, and the bottom right was Glacier Park in Montana. So pretty cool places. And I'm also a private pilot. So that's me just a couple of years ago flying. It's actually more like 15 years ago, but I'll say it's a couple of years ago. So I'm going to share a few things that I think are some of the key takeaways from today's talk. The first key takeaway is you should book a trip to either Scotland or Montana. I think that's good advice. So to continue our Klein family photos, there's me as the founder of Satrix Solutions. We, by the way, have a booth right out here. So if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to stop by and spend some time with us. I will give you the abbreviated version of who we are and what we do. We are a voice of customer consulting organization. Companies rely on us to deliver reliable data, customer feedback sentiment that ultimately drives their decision making. So if your company is thinking about customer feedback and is hopefully doing the right thing to use that feedback and those insights to make decisions, to allocate resources, to prioritize, that's our area of expertise. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, of course. And we'll start with case study number 1. So show of hands, by the way, who are just getting started in the voice of customer feedback realm? Just getting started. Okay. So a lot of hands went up. So this first case study is relevant to all of you folks. And it is because there are a lot of opportunities to listen. There's a lot of listening posts, effectively, that you can establish for your business. And one question is, well, where do I start? What do I do first? And as a good consultant, the answer to that is, well, it depends. It depends on a number of factors. But what I'm going to share with you is the way that we think about voice of customer endeavors. We think about it from the perspective of the customer journey and the different touch points or moments of truth along the lines of the customer journey. So these are actually the services that Satrix Solutions offers. And I share this with you because it's important to think about what you're going to start with when you think about how do I initiate a voice of customer or customer feedback program. You could start with post-sale. Right? Get feedback from companies that have evaluated your services or your offering and why they decided to go with you or a competitor. You could also identify a pain point is the initial onboarding or implementation phase of your customer relationship. So let's establish a listening post there to make sure that we're doing our best to continuously improve that endeavor. The ongoing engagement, of course, offers a lot of opportunity to listen. Customer surveys, customer satisfaction surveys, Net Promoter, which obviously a lot of folks are talking about, support ticket surveys, product-oriented surveys, so a lot of opportunities there. Also, don't forget to listen and offer your employees a voice. Employee feedback, highly correlated with a good customer experience, because engaged employees are going to deliver a better service experience for your customers. So they should be afforded an opportunity to share their feedback as well. And then as you mature, you might initiate something like customer advisory board or customer journey mapping or customer perception audit. And then finally, if you're dealing with churn issues, maybe there's an opportunity to understand specifically why your customers are leaving through a churn analysis, which is a formal feedback program that identifies the real reason your customers are leaving and potentially going elsewhere. So in deciding where to start, you really first have to ask the question, well, what's the biggest opportunity for me to improve my business? Where do the pain points lie within my organization? And based on that, you can determine which feedback program you start first and which you might add later. A lot of our clients do start with Net Promoter. They might start with sales win-loss, depending on what their challenges are. But I'll leave it to you to decide which in your company might provide the biggest bang for the buck, as it were. So that's case study number one. But the important point here is also when you endeavor to initiate a feedback program, it's obviously of great importance that you do it properly. And you also want to make sure that you continue to elevate your customer feedback. You don't want to ever stay static. The thing about customer experience is you never cross the goal line and spike the football, right? You're never done with customer experience. The competitive landscape is always changing. Other folks are always trying to raise their game. So you need to continue to innovate. You need to continue to raise the bar. And that's important. So if we think about the companies that are world-class from customer experience, and I'm sure we can all think about the names that are often regurgitated as world-class, they exhibit a number of traits and behaviors and activities that lead them to be world-class. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's obviously the folks that are on the bottom there are not world-class. I'm curious, anyone have any ideas of what types of companies would be at the bottom? What would they exhibit as far as their voice of customer programs that might put them at the bottom? That's one possibility. Any other thoughts? Because a lot of people suggest that, well, if they're not doing anything, obviously that's potentially problematic from a voice of customer perspective. But I will share with you there are actually two things that are worse than not doing anything at all. And frankly, this is stuff that we see on a pretty frequent basis. One is companies that have a feedback program, invite input, but then don't do anything with it. Hugely problematic, right? I mean, customers are taking their time to share their insights, and then it goes into a black hole. And I'm sure we've all had that experience because we all respond to customer surveys, or you should. If you don't, you very well should. But only for companies who prove to you that they are actually doing something with the feedback. They are acknowledging the feedback. They're acting on it. They're using it to improve their products and services. So that's one situation, the companies that don't do anything. Another, which is even worse, arguably, are the companies who are using data that is not reliable or representative of their customer sentiment. They're relying on bad data to make decisions. It's a pretty scary notion. And we've seen circumstances where companies have allocated significant resources or changed their service model based on what they thought was the right thing on customer input, and in fact it wasn't because the data was biased, or it wasn't representative because it was low response rates, or there was some gaming or manipulation going on, and so they were relying on bad data. So what we want to look at, of course, is establishing a program that is done properly and adhering to best practices. And then you want to do something with the feedback. So the first thing that a lot of companies do is what we call triage, right? Is they identify either the detractors or the unhappy customers, and they circle the wagons. They try to get with them and make sure that they can hopefully alleviate their concerns, address their pain points, and save that revenue. So that's sort of level one in your maturity level of your customer feedback program. The second one that you want to look to, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, is closing the loop in a formal and rigorous manner, right? Having discipline as far as getting back with the customers that respond to your survey. Not just the detractors, but those folks who might be either passives right on the cusp, or promoters, or even non-responders. And we'll talk about that in a moment. The third is promoter activation. Let's mobilize your promoters. Let's get them to do things that'll actually help our business. People say they might recommend or they might be enthused, but sometimes you have to nudge them to get them to act in a way that's actually going to be beneficial to your organization. So that's something else that as you move on your maturity scale, you should think about. Then, of course, there's reliance on feedback to make important decisions around improvements or your priorities or your resource allocation. So, this is another level of sophistication in customer experience or customer feedback endeavors that a lot of companies, frankly, miss the mark. They don't have their organization really using this input in manners that are very strategic and very thoughtful for the future of the business. Also, you want to build your culture of customer centricity, and we'll talk about that in a moment. No company that's world-class does so without a firmly customer-centric culture. Customer centricity, customer experience is their North Star. It's part of their DNA. You know, if we think about the best of the best, every employee gets it. Every employee knows what they're setting out to do. And then finally, quantification of the return on investment. So you got to think about this as to, all right, what kind of business outcome is it driving for my organization? Are we improving retention? Are we improving expansion, upsell, cross-sell? Is our customer lifetime value getting better over time? Are referrals actually being generated? These are the ways that you can quantify and ultimately increase the value, the valuation of your company. So those are some of the levels of maturity. So a key takeaway here, of course, if you're going to initiate, be thoughtful about what you start with, make sure you're doing it properly, and make sure that you're continuing to innovate and raise the bar going forward. Don't be static in your customer feedback programs. So case study 2 is a scenario where, and we've touched on this a little bit, companies are doing it, but frankly, they're doing it wrong. And this is the one that scares me, kind of keeps me up at night, if you will. There's a lot of ways that you can be doing it wrong that leads you to bad data. So poor fundamentals to avoid, and this is something you want to be thoughtful of. This isn't just one company case study. This is actually sort of an aggregation of a lot of companies that I've spoken to over time. One is poor survey design. If you are going to field a survey, you have to be thoughtful and deliberate and adhere to best practices in the questions that you're going to ask. It's not just, you know, a net promoter is an easy question, right? We all know how likely are you to recommend. It's pretty obvious. But if you're going to endeavor to delve a little bit further, which most of our clients do, then you have to have the question verbiage proper. You have to have the scales correct. Otherwise, you potentially skew or bias your data. Survey population issues. Who do you invite? How do you make sure you're inviting the right people, the decision makers, influencers, users? How do you make sure that you're not cherry picking? How do you determine which contacts you're asking which questions? If your contact data is good, if it's actually comprehensive. So these are all important questions to ask when you're determining your survey population. Of course, you need to maximize response rates. We need high levels of participation. Otherwise, we're not getting representative data. And there's a number of strategies and tactics that enable you to maximize response rates. There's a lot of content on our website. We have white papers on this, so please feel free to go there. But there's a lot of things involved in maximizing response rates and making sure you're getting 40, 50, 60% of your customers to respond to your surveys. And you know that you're taking action on reliable and representative data. So gaming is very, very common. We're all probably most familiar with the notion of begging for scores. For those of you who went to the local auto dealer, bought a car, and the guy said, I really need you to give me the highest score in this survey. Otherwise, I might not be able to feed my family, with the bonuses that we get. So that's one example. It's an obvious one. There's a lot of other gaming that takes place. I just mentioned cherry picking, talking about who gets invited. Sometimes people, we shouldn't invite Joe. They're not the right person to respond to the survey, probably because they're, might give you a lower score. Or you might I've seen companies that eliminate survey responses after they come in. Oh, you can't, Mary's crazy. You can't have that survey response. She's always very negative. So there's justification that goes on that, again, skews your data. So no gaming. Unbiased interpretation is important. We need someone with objectivity, someone who doesn't have skin in the game, right? Because you can make the data conform to your preconceived notions. If you're having someone sort of the chicken in the hen house or the fox in the hen house, is that what it is? So if you have someone who's really close to the situation, they can actually make the data almost tell whatever story they want. So you need unbiased and objective insights. And then, of course, you need to take the appropriate level of action. Inaction is dangerous when it comes to feedback programs. So that's case study 2. So just think about all of the potential pitfalls and do whatever you can to avoid them and make sure you're adhering to best practice and thinking about all these things before you even get started. So case study 3, and we talked about this from the maturity model, is closing the loop. And closing the loop takes a number of different forms, but really should have some rigor around the loop closing process. So closing the loop simply is, I invite you to provide feedback. You share your thoughts. I then acknowledge your feedback, and I discuss with you in more detail what it means. Because in a survey, you're going to get top-level insights usually, right? The survey is the start of the discussion. It's not the end. So the survey should actually foster more engagement and more discussion with your customers about what frustrates them or what you can do better. So that's closing the loop. And of course, you want to close the loop with detractors first, because those are the accounts at risk, then passives, then promoters in the net promoter construct. But you also should close the loop with high-value non-responders. So if you have big-time revenue customer accounts that didn't respond to your survey, are they apathetic? Are they checked out? Or are they not responding? Did they not even get the email? Let's make sure that we discuss with them what their feelings are and maybe encourage them to respond to the next survey the next time you invite them. So the closing the loop process really should be well thought out and documented, and so you can create cases. This is an example of how this company monitors case creation and case closings around closing the loop. And this can be done in Salesforce. It can be done in a lot of different ways. Certainly can be done in Totango as well. And again, important to just monitor this, document the conversations that you're having, and make sure that feedback is then shared so we can strengthen the relationships after they respond to your survey. So case study 4, ensure the insights are shared broadly. This is something, again, that we unfortunately see a lot of opportunity is left on the table. Feedback is collected, and it may be high-quality feedback. And the customer success team sees it, maybe the C-suite sees it, but then it doesn't get distributed more broadly. So what we contend is that every department in your organization should thirst for this valuable and rich feedback. Every department, every business leader should have a reason to say, hey, what are our customers saying? What do they like? What do they not like? What messages are resonating? Marketing, for example, clearly should understand what the dynamics are, what resonates about our messaging, what are the competitors doing? Sales should have a real vested interest here. What are the value drivers that our customers are telling us? Is it what we are conveying to them during the sales process? Again, what's the competitive circumstances that may be cropping up that customers will share in a survey? They'll tell you if they think maybe, for example, you don't have a feature or function that one of your competitors do. So that's important information to know for your sales team, for your marketing team, for your C-suite, for your product people. So make sure that this is being shared broadly. Human resources even should be thinking about how do we hire the proper people who will best service our customers, and who are the outperformers on our team. Should they get promoted? Should they get bonused? Should we recognize and reward their efforts? So if you do this, if you make sure that this feedback is prominent across your organization and everybody is accessing it and thinking about it when making their decisions, you're really going to have a significant impact. And there's my little dancing happy customers at the end there. So that's case study 4. Again, key takeaway there is just make sure we're thinking about how to make this accessible to everyone. An Excel spreadsheet, by the way, isn't the best way to share all of this feedback, right? People having to comb through cells and rows on an Excel spreadsheet. So there's likely going to be some analysis, some interpretation, some visualizations that need to be shared, that need to be catered to the different audiences. So I'll have you think about that as well. And then finally, on case study number 5, take steps to emphasize the cultural adoption. So I spoke about this a moment ago as well. There's so many things that you can do to make this front and center in your organization. And we talk about them a lot. In fact, my entire presentation at Totango last year was about culture building around your customer experience initiatives. And by the way, the video is online, so you guys are welcome to watch that. We won't have enough time to go through all of it today. But so important to think about what this means for all employees. So the customer-facing employees obviously should get it, right? If they don't get it, then you have a problem right from the outset. But really, everyone in the company, whether they touch the customer or not, should be effectively rowing in the same direction. They should be have common interests in mind around delivering that differentiated service experience. And frankly, one of the more interesting service offerings that we have today that's garnering a lot of interest is what we call interdepartmental surveys. Interdepartmental surveys, how are your internal departments working together? Because sometimes as CSMs, you all know, you are reliant upon other people to help you get stuff done for the benefit of the customer. And if your internal departments aren't there for you, then you can't be there for your customer. And so the interdepartmental survey allows you to rate or identify where there may be breakdowns internally. Again, that's relevant to the culture building effort. If everybody is aligned in their understanding of the importance of customer experience, the behaviors that need to be exhibited, then that type of thing does not happen. So, it's got to be obviously a top-down commitment. It's got to come from the C-suite. They have to make sure that they're reinforcing this on a regular basis. It has to be baked into your mission, vision, values, right? That stuff is, it's who you are. It's your values that you're portraying both internally and to your customer base. You have to be making decisions based on the data as we spoke about. You can map the journey and get some perspective to all employees about all the touch points and the role that they play, all of them, in delivering an exceptional service experience. Something we've had a lot of success with in many of our clients is this notion of a championship team. Championship team is a cross-functional group of passionate individuals who are going to help you root cause the data, your customer feedback, and think about what are the actions that maybe the mid-level or the senior level right below the executive level, what can they do? All working together to continuously improve and to make sure that this momentum is carried through. So that's something worth thinking about. Rewards and recognition programs, certainly important to keep the conversation alive and to emphasize the important behaviors and traits. Socialization and storytelling. The best companies in the world always have stories to share. And if you guys read customer experience articles and publications, they're often in the form of stories, right? Where so-and-so did something great, jumped in to save an account, or went out of their way to do something wonderful for a client. These things are happening in your organizations, but sometimes they're not shared. And when you share them, when you talk about them, that reinforces the culture. And that makes sure that people understand what is expected and what is desired. Give employees a voice, we talked about that. And then finally, it's all got to start with hiring. Because if you don't hire the right people from the outset, obviously that's problematic. You have to hire people with high emotional intelligence who understand the importance of service delivery, maybe some of the touchy-feely stuff, but that stuff is important. So these are some of the things around the culture building that I advise you to think about as well as you continue to mature your voice of customer programs. So there are my 5 case studies. Hopefully I've given you some things to think about and to take back to your organizations. Again, we have a booth right out here, so happy to chat with you after.